Sunday live stream. Let me reposition, get a good angle here. Hopefully you're all doing well. We'll be doing some Jade leaves today. And yeah, Happy New Year. This will be exciting. We're going to be talking a little bit about Jade leaves, of course, and some of the transitions that I've been doing with my tea supply, and oolong. I had a very wonderful discussion with Alice of HGT Oolong from Taiwan. Just kind of a food for thought. I'll go more into details. I'll publish that on a patron-only post, which you can kind of get into the nitty-gritty of it. But we'll be talking a little bit about that, which will be fun. So if you haven't already, get your tea kettles going, and we'll be drinking some Jade leaves. I actually just finished a session of Jade leaves yesterday, so I'm going to start a new batch. As many of you may know, I was drinking a lot of commemorative raw and commemorative ripe during the winter. I was just craving for that aged, semi-aged taste. But now that snow has melted, and hopefully we'll start to get less cold days. It's still quite cold here in Seattle. But I just started to have more and more of a craving for kind of a more vigorous, younger, raw pour. And I wanted something that wasn't too stimulating. And so for me, that is Jade leaves. So I've been drinking a lot of Jade leaves, and I've liked that refreshing experience. So now, in my 2 jars that I go to almost daily are either Jade leaves, pretty large one. Maybe we're a little 2 cakes on that. And then I'm still, no, I changed it. Sorry. I finished my commemorative ripe. Now I'm doing golden branches. So golden branches Jade leaves is where I'm drinking recently. So it looks like hopefully there was a pause on this live stream. So hopefully that will catch up. We are doing this. So Jared, welcome. Other folks, welcome if you're just tuning in. Feel free to get your tea sets ready. And we'll go into tea drinking, tea talking. A little bit more casual live this time. I'll get more into the nitty gritty probably next live with some more selective topics. So let me know if you all are drinking tea with me. And if you are, which tea are you drinking? And so first I'm just prepping this teapot. Now I used to drink Jade leaves in a gaiwan for a long time. Distant mountains, I would still do that. But I feel that now Jade leaves is starting to come to its own. It can handle a teapot, a seasoned Yixing teapot, and it actually is quite round. It's almost overpowering. It's almost too much, but not yet. There's not quite that tipping point. So I've really actually enjoyed the Jade leaves in a teapot. If you haven't tried it, I strongly would recommend it. If anyone is on this live stream, do let me know if you can see it all right. It seems that the stream has been paused, and I just want to make sure. Great, I don't think that was just me. That was just my own situation. So I'm going to stay tight for 1 more minute. I'm going to let a few more people join in, and I'm going to clean out the tip of my teapot here so I don't get any flow. Alrighty. I'm going to use about 2.5 grams. I use a little bit less. And going on the theme of simplicity, I'm not going to be using a tea pitcher when brewing it from the teapot itself. My little trick when storing tea in jars, I just keep the wrapper cut around it, put it on top. That way, there's a long period of time before I drink that tea, I'll know what I put in this jar. I have a lot of jars lying around, so this is particularly helpful in keeping track of what's in those jars. Jade leaves, gotta join this. Jade leaves, everyone loves Jade leaves. Is a fan favorite. Everyone loves Jade leaves. What is there not to not like about Jade leaves? So just 2 cups teapot. The reason I'm doing this is because I've drunk this tea a lot. I'm very familiar with the aroma. Sometimes if you're just re-encountering a new tea, of course you'd want this tea pitcher to be able to pick up on the beauty of that aroma, right? That's a very good distinguishing quality or characteristic you're looking for in pour, right? Really beautiful aroma from the dry leaves, really beautiful aroma left from the tea pitcher after pouring out the liquid. Though I've drank this so many times now that I'm just opting out for a more simplistic way of brewing. Great, we got some jade leaves in a teapot over there. Fantastic. I'm waiting on a COVID test at the hospital. Fun morning. Well, hopefully, Andrew, this will add a little bit more entertainment to your wait over there. I do know that the numbers have been spiking over there, so stay safe, drink some tea, stay calm. And then we are going to also talk a little bit about oolong. There were some comments that were sparked about the famous mountains in Taiwan. And I'll share that in more detail on the Patreon, but I think it is something that's worth mentioning. Now, I've talked a lot about the accessibility of famous mountain teas, right? Quality Pu-erh is going to be only harder and harder to source and to find because there's a number of things at play, right? Pu-erh tea is a scarce commodity. There's only so many old tea trees, and there's more wealthy, educated, and for lack of a better word, maybe people with a lot of resources that are seeking out quality teas. And so kind of with that rule of thumb, right, kind of more of an estimate. Of course, this is not an exact figure, but about 3% of all the Pu-erh tea is coming from older tea trees. So with that in mind, on top of getting old tea trees, we're trying to source particularly famous mountains. We have to come to the really radically open, logical conclusion that it would be very difficult for someone outside of China who is maybe not wealthy or as educated on Pu-erh to be able to easily access those types of famous mountains and old tea tree material. Now, I've talked about this a number of times on Patreon, but we're going to apply that thought process to Taiwanese oolongs. So in previous lives, I've mentioned that, 10 years or so ago, and Andrew can even relate to this, it seemed like there was a very consistent, stable supply of good quality high mountain oolongs from Taiwan 10, 15, 20 years ago, even to some smaller vendors like here in Seattle and probably some in California as well, these kind of purveyors, right? They were from Taiwan, they sourced good quality tea. There wasn't a large demand in China and Taiwan, especially a wealthy consumer base that was actively seeking these teas. And so in some areas, of course, connoisseurs would always pay a premium, but maybe you could get some of that good quality tea outside of Taiwan through connections, family connections. One, there wasn't a huge demand, so you only needed to sell a few kilos, right, to a few select consumers. And we noticed that you could really get, these names, Alishan, Lishan, Dailing, these famous mountain names were supposedly readily accessible. And so what we knew is when we drank those teas 10, 15 years ago, they were quite profound, quite incredible, aromatic, sweet, tasty. And then as the years progressed, we noticed sometimes the prices increasing or staying stable, and the quality never resembled that of past years. And unfortunately, that trend continued. So we started to see years of multiple mountains where more of them were a little bit less desirable, maybe less tasty. Maybe there was just one or two mountains that were really good instead of all of them really good. And so that trend, unfortunately, continued until it became more common, a certain taste profile that was convenient around all the mountains. And so why might that be? Well, Chinese consumers became more wealthy, more educated. They wanted to get their hands on good quality teas. Taiwanese also, right? It's a very culture predominance of those type of teas. They hold a lot of cultural value, historical value. And so here in the West, we may not be able to pay that premium or want to pay that premium for the cultural or historical value of those teas. And so it's just with supply and demand, to be able to say that I am able to easily and consistently get famous mountain teas should be questioned. And I think the client and the consumer who are buying those teas should also question yourself and the seller, just with the market demands. And so, unfortunately, we're starting to see, I think has already been the case, and I've started to say, Pu-erh is a buyer's beware market, especially old tea trees, famous mountain trees, etc. I think that can be crossed over and applied to Taiwanese high mountain oolongs. And the comment that was shared with me from a good colleague of mine who's very, very knowledgeable about Taiwanese oolongs is that of dialing. The quantity of dialing is so tiny, right? There's probably a number of farmers you can count on one hand that produce authentic dialing. And so, and their prices can be quite low. On the lower, I mean, high. On the low end, you're looking at like $300 for 600 grams. Me personally, I think that's actually quite affordable for dialing. But then there's these other areas around dialing, right? The lower elevations, the neighboring mountainsides or hills or valleys that can maybe very easily access dialing that maybe are claiming to be dialing. And so when you're looking for that authentic taste, it can be hard to come by because once you don't have that experience of authentic dialing, then how do you know what to compare it to? And so she shared an analogy with me, which I thought was quite interesting. One, I'm not an expert on high mountain oolongs by any stretch of the imagination, right? I just thought it was an interesting dialogue conversation. Is with Lao Banzeng, is a thought process I use that one, Lao Banzeng is absurdly expensive and extremely fraudulent when people are producing it about what is authentic. And if you did have the opportunity to drink authentic Lao Banzeng, maybe you wouldn't like it because the taste profile is stronger, in some ways bitter. Now, it doesn't pierce the palate. It's a tolerable bitter with a really unique aroma. It's quite beautiful, actually. But it's not to my liking. So a very high premium you have to pay, and maybe not the taste profile of some Westerners or your particular tea palate. So what about applying that to dialing? We don't even know if we've had the opportunity to drink some of those authentic mountains, and what is the taste profile, and the premium we're going to have to pay for that authentic tea may not reflect in the taste profile we're expecting, the value that we are expecting. And so there's all these things we need to consider and think about. So I think it's even more of a strong argument to really stop paying so much close attention to the particular region or a mountain or a name or province where you're trying to associate value, and instead focus on the quality of the tea itself. And in order to do that, there's more importance on being able to have the framework and skills to be able to correctly identify the quality of the tea you're drinking, right? These are skills you're developing yourself through kind of just experimentation, trying a number of companies and brands and qualities, coming to conclusions yourself rather than listening to peers or blogs or news sources trying to represent the value that you're trying to pull apart. Instead, just take time to explore things like the 3-day rule and try to understand the quality yourself. And when you're purchasing tea, thinking about tea, you can determine that value. Does this tea, one, do I like it? Do I enjoy it? That's very important. And then does this tea have value to myself? Does this tea have value to my peers? Does this tea have value in the market? But I'll share more in depth what she shared with me. I think it was very eye-opening. I don't want to get into the crazy details because I am not a Pu-erh expert. I mean, an oolong expert. But I thought it was very interesting to apply that same famous mountain concept to famous mountains in Taiwan. To me, the logic sounds very, very solid, right? How can we so easily get famous mountain teas from Taiwan when we're Westerners over here? And so I think some of the same thought process can be applied there, right? When I go to Yunnan, the hospitality is amazing. I can visit these mountains. I can see these old tea trees. But that's not to say that is what is in the tea cakes that's being sold to me. And I think with Taiwan becoming probably one of the most sought after high mountain oolongs, not only because of cleanliness, but because of the mastery of processing those teas and the international demand and popularity, it's just going to become more and more hard, right? Anything famous mountain, limited, scarce, we have to apply the logic of what is the realistic probability that what I am drinking is actually what it claims to be. So just more reason to question and think deeply about what you're drinking and base the quality and value of the tea based on your own set of principles and skills rather than trying to refer to a particular name or just kind of verbatim repeating what someone may have told you. So I just wanted to pass that on, that can be applied to any type of tea. Nice little black color. Yes, I got a little. I have 2 of these. One for the office, one for my new live streams, and then we have the gooseneck for when we need to be doing some newer tea testing and sampling. Because this is harder to pour, I will say, to get used to it. The gooseneck. Hold on one sec. Let me drink some tea. Andrew sharing some real world experience of buying some fake tea. We are all a victim of that. I think even if we do not think we are a victim, we probably are a victim, or at least maybe a more tolerable term would be mislabeled, like buying a mislabeled tea. Maybe that's more tolerable. What are your thoughts on tetsubins versus modern kettles? Wow, what a great question. So I've been very lucky and fortunate in the past to be able to use, I'm going to be careful about using the word authentic, but maybe an antique tetsubin, so made of cast iron. And so when I mean maybe antique tetsubin, that has to do with the raw material. We have to understand that the old raw material they used to make tetsubins in Japan, the raw material of that cast iron, is very, very, very different than the cast iron raw material they use to make tetsubins today. Now, however, with that being removed, modern kettles, it's very important to make sure that you have an entirely safe food standard stainless steel in its entirety through the inside of the kettle. I even go to extremes of making sure there's no plastic on the lid. So just that's the first thing with modern kettles. And if you can find kettles in that capacity, I think they're great. I think they can do the majority of what an individual needs them to do. And now with all the types of brands and competitions, you can even get some nice design elements, which is great. Now with tetsubans, they do radically change the texture of the water. And you need to keep that into consideration when you're brewing tea. And I think to a certain extent, they can make water heavier. And that can be good or bad, depending on the tea you are making. So with tetsubun, I don't know if you are aware, when you use them for decades, they develop a coating. So you can actually look inside the tetsubun, and they will develop this white-like coating. So this is not rust. This is a white-like coating of heavy mineral content being built up over time. And some people believe that's the value of a good tetsubun, right? It doesn't rust easy, and instead it will build up mineral deposits, which is a fascinating characteristic of tetsubans. And so when I was able to use, and we tested this, we did this in Danong actually, in later hours with some clients, we had a 100-some-year-old tetsubun. We had a pure silver kettle, and then to an extreme of that, we had a pure golden kettle, which is can't even be considered because it's so outrageously expensive. And then you have modern kettles, which I would equate to stainless steel. Anything in the plastic, I'm just going to remove it. I wouldn't even use it. And so we tested those throughout the teas, and they all had a tragically different effect on the tea. First, you want to boil, pour into cups, and just drink the water. What is the effect on the water? How does that taste? Is it sweeter? Is it heavier? Is it rougher? And we noticed with tetsubun, it was actually more kind of heavy, for lack of a better word, more full-bodied in some ways. Some iron-like, metallic-like characteristics, very subtle. And so tetsubun also will contain the heat much better. So when you take a tetsubun, it boils, you put it in the teapot. I would argue that the temperature going into that teapot is probably the highest it can possibly be from a kettle. Even a stainless steel metal kettle, boiling 100 degrees, you're pouring it out, maybe it's 99, maybe it's 98 when it's interacting with the tea. And I really feel because of the thickness of the tetsubun, it may be able to get a slightly higher heat. And so there's also what people will say is tetsubun is really good for aged tea. And I also will say it's very, very good for ripe tea because it's more heavy, it's more dense. So with all of that in mind, I found tetsubuns are very good for the highest heat possible. a more heavy, slightly more metallic taste, which can be applied to ripe pours, especially aged ripe pours, very good, very effectively, and very, very, very aged pour. So something more than 20, 30 years. Tetsubens are almost preferred because of the ability to keep the highest heat possible and have a little bit more of a heavy texture to the water. Though I did find a negative effect to Tetsubens versus things like raw pour, younger raw pour, even young ripe pour, or teas that were between raw and ripe, maybe a wild ripe tea that had a lot of personality, delicate and subtle characteristics. Did not find a Tetsubun was the best tool to use when brewing those teas. Silver was very, very different. It had its on and off days. Obviously, it wouldn't be able to retain heat too well once it kind of gets off because very, very thin makeup of the kettle. Now, if you had a very thick silver kettle, that is different. But I also noticed it applied a slightly metallic-like taste, which in some characteristics maybe be good for ripe. I didn't like the silver kettle as much as I did the Tetsubun for older teas. But then you go to modern kettles, you can use it on younger, older, ripe, raw, semi-aged pretty effectively and not have a drastic effect on the quality of the water. So I really think stainless steel is probably the best kettle to use all around, and that's probably where you should focus your resources. And then when you get to a point where you feel you have maybe a lot of very expensive aged pour or a lot of expensive ripe pour, then it may make sense to invest in a Tetsubun, right? So you can start to invest in that Tetsubun. Use water. When you do start to use water, try to focus on just using one type of water so it can build up that that mineral content. You can season that Tetsubun, and it really is just used in particular situations. So it's not a good, I think, investment if you're just going to have one kettle and it'll be Tetsubun, because you'll notice it'll have such a drastic effect on the water and may not be suitable for all tea types, where a stainless steel kettle type will be suitable for all tea types. So I would say this is number one, use that. Once you kind of start noticing your financial situation in tea has changed, a lot of aged tea, a lot of aged ripe, maybe it makes sense then to invest in a Tetsubun. So that's my personal opinion, and I do think Tetsubuns in a Tea Masters Accord, or you're very fanatical about tea and you maybe spend too much money on Teaware and tea, you might need a Tetsubun in your collection. But until then, this will probably solve all the things you need. So that is a fantastic question. Thank you for asking that. I knew it when I bought it too cheap. That is one easy indication of knowing something may not be authentic, is the price point, right? If it has great value. So this can be applied to Tetsubuns too, right? High mountain oolongs, famous mountain pour, old tea tree pour, famous mountain teas, and Tetsubuns. If the theory, and Yixing clay teapots, if the theory is these things have so much value, they're such good quality, that they will appreciate with age every year, become more expensive, then when you're about to buy one of these beautiful things, Tetsubuns, famous mountain pour, age pour, Yixing teapots, why is the seller willing to sell it so cheap if they also understand that fundamentally, if it is of the highest quality, it will increase in value every year? Because for me, if I knew this would increase in value every year, why not just wait one more year and sell for more money next year? There are rare scenarios, I would say extremely rare now, where maybe someone is struggling in a business, they need to offload inventory, and maybe they're more willing to sell a very high quality thing for a lower price. But even that, I think, is kind of bizarre and absurd, because if they are a business owner that is well connected, has networks and clients, then they would be able to sell that at a reasonable price to a knowledgeable individual without any real concern of time, right? It'll be easier to sell something rather than a very cheap price. So I would be, of course, very concerned about that. I'm glad it was helpful. It's just my personal opinion based on my own experiences. I think I know quite a bit, but I do think there is more I don't know than I do know. But I do feel I have quite a bit of knowledge in Pu-erh and some of the aspects related to Pu-erh. But there's definitely still more I do not know than I do know. And once you go into Japanese types of materials, even more so outside of my expertise, right? I'm very more focused on Pu-erh from China and some of the Teaware from China. I'm more current, but I'm glad that answer was helpful. If you have more questions, always feel free to ask. It's always fun to entertain, especially new questions like that. We get a lot of questions around Pu-erh, so it's fun to change it up every once in a while. So now on the second infusion of Jade leaves, I'm going to bring this down from a boil. So first infusion, always using that boil, and then now I'm bringing this down probably to 96 degrees Celsius or so. Really all I'm doing is waiting for that water to settle down, become calm, right? I don't want to hear the water's bubbling. I don't want to hear any agitation in the water, and then it will be ready to brew. Yeah, but the Jade leaves has developed quite a bit. It's developed quite nicely. And also, this older teapot has no filter, so it does always easily get clogged up, unfortunately, but I've learned to deal with that. I've liked this Jade leaves because it's gotten more of a body than it used to. It used to be really light, crisp, and as Aaron always used to like, satisfying. Like, it's just craving this strange, just very satisfying. Thirst quenching. It's another terminology you want to see in Pu-erh. It should be very thirst quenching, not drying. And I feel like it's kept a lot of those characteristics, but become more full, become more round. Almost getting to that very first stage of semi-aged tea, though, maybe another year or so. Alrighty, why did you pick Jade leaves and a pot to brew it in today, Jeffrey? So, when I did my transition as it was getting warmer, I drank all my commemorative raw, and I was getting a little bored with commemorative raw for the same kind of reasons I expressed before, right? It's very incredible aroma when you drink it and you revisit commemorative raw, but in some ways, it feels a little one-dimensional. And so I finished up my commemorative raw and commemorative ripe. I wanted something different. I think we ate some fried food. We ate out once, and then we had some fried food at home, and I was craving that raw, penetrating, kind of cutting the oil feeling, and so I just wanted to go to a raw, and I didn't want to do this in mountains because it was still too energetic for me, and I felt Cherish and Destiny raw is not quite the abundance I was seeking, and so Jade leaves was just always very refreshing, and so I just pulled some out, and it was very enjoyable. I started drinking it daily, so I've been drinking Jade leaves now, I think for a little over a week, almost 2 weeks, and filled up 2 cakes into a jar, and I decided that's the tea I'm going to really sit with and drink a lot. Put it in a gaiwan. It didn't have that abundance and thickness that I was craving because I was drinking so much commemorative raw, right? That tea's almost 5-6 years now. And so I said, well, let's do it. Let's just see if Jade leaves is ready for a teapot. And I put about 2 grams to start. Phenomenal. Really tasty, really thick, really balanced. And then I just never went back to a gaiwan. So I think Jade leaves is really ready for a good quality Yixing teapot. So that is why it is my preferred method of Jade leaves at the moment. That could change. I'd add, I'm all about Mountain Oasis now. Well, Daniel, I can't say that is a bad choice. Mountain Oasis is incredible tea. Because I was drinking the Mountain Oasis commemorative raw, and that'll be in there. I have a little jar. Mountain Oasis hanging out. So it's always on my table. But I will say my American supply of Mountain Oasis is dwindling. I have a cake, half a large cake left. All the rest is in Taiwan, and I think I have some in California. So I'm worried about my supply of Mountain Oasis that is here. When are you digging into Mountain Oasis, Jeff? Does it seem different to you lately? So I do feel Mountain Oasis has gotten more. It's getting more and more of that semi-aged characteristic. Now, keep in mind that the Mountain Oasis I'm drinking was purchased and then immediately stored in Taiwan. So the acceleration of the aging will be more than the normal Mountain Oasis if you purchased it here in the U.S. And it really has a nice balance. And for a while, I would say last year, I felt it was muted. It had that semi-aged characteristic, but it didn't have that kind of drought punch, that menthol-like characteristic. So that when that first happened, it was muted when it was released. Then it had that menthol characteristic, which I think I shared with some of you all, and then that kind of went away. And then in the 2 weeks ago, I saw that menthol-like flavor profile transition into something where I can't quite identify it yet. I don't know if it's going to be more floral or stone fruit. There was a unique characteristic coming from that tea recently that I can't describe. So I would be curious in you, Daniel, if you have experienced something similar, where it's not quite menthol, but maybe something new, a new journey, new stage of this tea. That's where I think Mountain Oasis is in, so I'm giving it some time. And then I will be revisiting it. I really want to drink that tea in the spring, hot weather, a little bit of humidity, open a window, get some breeze, then drink that tea. Wow, I think that's when we'll really see that tea shine in a higher heat environment. Yeah, Mountain Oasis, but so cold, ripe is the way. True, when it's too cold, always need your ripe on standby. But yeah, now it's warming up, I've been drinking more and more raw. I do think a good quality raw can be drunk in the winter. It has to be quite a good quality raw to be able to experience the beauty of it. But I really do think it will be at its full potential in hotter weather. This is great. A lot of comments here. I love it. So it's good. You can't drink it, so you won't run out. That's right. I don't want to run. I have a case, more than a case of Mountain Oasis. I don't think running out is a problem, but I want to be drinking that tea for a very long time. I'm starting to get more into aged Pu-erh, and I've noticed I really like an aggressive taste with a long-lasting minimal sweetness that builds in the throat. Do you have any recommendations? So I'm very careful about recommending particular teas. I just try to be as non-biased as possible, and I think it's more important to understand the basics of what you're drinking and why you like tea. So, but I will share this analogy if you aren't familiar with it. So with Pu-erh, we have to remember when a tea ages, what are we looking for? And so there's two real genres. If you could picture a graph where there is a aggressive flavor profile in the beginning years, which is unfortunately a very, very big misconception that young raw Pu-erh is very aggressive and bitter and astringent, and it punches you in the face, and that's good because you need a lot of craziness for that tea to turn into something. Now, I'm not a part of that thought school. I'm in a completely different point of view. But if you have something very aggressive and astringent, and it's not so enjoyable to drink at the moment, maybe you're hoping that tea mellows out over time. So maybe you want to buy some of those teas, and you hope they mellow out. Now, I don't think that's a particularly good thing to invest or buy, because why would you want something to mellow out over time instead of develop over time? So you mentioned something about returning sweetness. That's good. You want that sweetness, that lingering. And if you like a more aggressive tea, that's fine. But do look for a tea that you like the day you drink it. Don't drink it, buy a tea, and hope it will turn into something better. And I particularly look for teas that have abundance. And what I mean by that is they are very durable. They are very multidimensional. So they could be aggressive in some regards, but if they're aggressive, they should not leave bitterness on the mouth. They should not leave dryness on the tongue. That is an undesirable characteristic that will unfortunately probably never go away with age. Instead, you can look for a strong flavor that is very abundant. When I say abundant, I mean maybe you can use 2, 3, 4 grams. If you want to use more than that, that's totally fine, especially if you like a stronger taste. But test it out with 3 or 4 grams, and if that tea can yield, right, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 steepings and keep flavor profile, I would classify that as abundance. And if it can do that and have different layers of flavor, it is pleasant in the mouth, meaning not leaving aggressiveness or bitterness on the palate, but instead turning into that beautiful sweetness, especially in the back of the mouth or throat. That is a good indication that that tea will develop, become more complex, more fruity, more aromatic, and instead of mellowing out, will become more rich, more multidimensional, more sweet, more aromatic. And so aggressive teas, there are particular mountains that are very, very aggressive. Maybe Hokai, Labanzang, those teas, Banzang, which Banzang is just another area of maybe mislabeling Labanzang, but it's another conversation, where they are aggressive, but do remember, the aroma in the pot is extremely perfume-like, floral-like, stone fruit-like. The aroma left in the cup, very perfume-like, floral-like. even though it may have a more bitter Chinese medicine-like characteristic. So in terms of recommendations, I'm sure many people on this chat will be more than happy to recommend you a number of teas, so feel free to do that. I don't want to recommend a particular company or brand, but I would say try a lot of different samples from a lot of different well-established brands. Try those. Get a few ones. Don't buy a cake. Buy as small as you can get. Bring them into your collection. Spend a month or so drinking those teas. Just drink each tea for 1 day, 1 tea, or 2 days, 1 tea. See how it feels. Is it comfortable in the stomach? Is it more comfortable in the morning, in the afternoon? Can I drink this tea for 3 days and not get bored on the 3rd day? That's a huge takeaway for me. If I drink the same tea and I'm bored on the 2nd day, well, I'm probably not going to want to buy a lot of that to age it, right? And so with aged pu-erh, even more so, aged pu-erh should be like medicine. Your body should almost be craving it. It should be very soothing, soft, abundant, warming in the stomach and palms, where you could just drink it almost every day and never get bored of it. So those are some of my takeaways on how you approach purchasing and considering pu-erh tea. So I apologize for not doing any particular recommendations. I just don't like to do a lot of endorsements and things on the live stream. Thanks for the response from Jay Leaves. It does seem different today. Have always been brewed in a gaiwan, but brewing in a juni today, and there is different sweetness. It is. You're getting that more rich robustness of the tea. Especially when you get a good teapot, it will bring it out even more so. So I really like that. I think about it and let you know. Sounds good. Let me know, Daniel. I want to know those developments in Mountain Oasis. Need a few cases to study. I like it. Yeah, get a few cases to study. Why not? Get a few cases to study. Why not? No COVID for Andy Bang. Congratulations on a negative test. That's great. That's great news. I was a little fatigued this weekend and wanted to be responsible. Always good to be responsible. Do you have any experience with Chaozhou teapots? Not enough to have an educational comment. I do know they used to be the affordable alternative to Yixing teapots. Now, if you know anything about Chaozhou teapots and Yixing teapots, now we all know that is not really the case. Both of those teapots have skyrocketed in price. And I do know that Chaozhou teapots were kind of the more affordable option. But now, because of the scarcity of the clays, they have risen significantly in price. And to get an authentic Chaozhou teapot or Yixing teapot, which is very, very difficult nowadays, unfortunately. I do not think that they hold the same characteristics as Yixing teapot, though they do a pretty freaking good job, especially for certain types of teas in that region. So I do know they used to make them very small. I've tried 1 or 2 from my Tea Master before. They're very, very quite cute and incredible craftsmanship. But other than that, I don't know. So sorry to not be able to answer that question in depth. That would be my only experience I've had. And I did notice that usually if someone has access and the resources to have a collection of Yixing, they may have a few Chaozhou, but they wouldn't particularly go very in-depth to expand their collection or inventory. And some people look at that from a financial side to invest in those too as well. But I don't know enough about that. I would love to learn more. So if you know anything, feel free to share in the comments below. So I'm going to get ready for the 3rd infusion here. Oh, and the gentleman that asked, or the lady that asked about the recommendations. So I have a few good videos on YouTube you can check out. One is how to buy pu-erh, and then the other is how to brew semi-aged pu-erh, and then the taste profile of aged pu-erh. Feel free to check all those out. I do kind of partake even more hints, more characteristics to look for when purchasing aged pu-erh that may be helpful. So feel free to watch some of those videos on my channel, and that might be more insightful. Alrighty. Does anyone have aged pu-erh recommendations that is watching this? If you're tuning in, is there a particular aged tea you like that you want to share? Well, I guess one I can share. I can share one. Okay. I drink a lot of Commemorative Raw. Commemorative Raw is a 2016 production. It was produced by Danong Tea Company. It is being sold by Bana Tea Company and Danong Tea Company. I think there may even be a 3rd seller now in the U.S. It is true, it's only 6 years old, but it has old tree material. very smooth, very aromatic. You can make it strong by putting in maybe 5-6 grams instead of 3. And I drink that tea quite a lot. It's very affordable too, and it's from old tea trees, so you can't get much better than that. Now, once you go into the 10+ year range, buckle your seatbelt. It's going to get expensive, especially if it is authentic. So I do think once you get into aged port, it's probably the most difficult and most buyers beware market. So just really second guess everything. Think deeply about who is selling it, how they're selling it, how is it possible, and then make a decision off of that. Jeff recommends Mountain Oasis. I don't know, is Mountain Oasis an aged tea? Well, I guess it's 1 year older than Commemorative Raw. So 2017, that's 5 years. That's a fairly large amount of time. So I guess, what is your definition of aged tea? I guess that would be a good question. For me, semi-aged tea is kind of in the 8 to 15 year range. Once it kind of gets past the 8-year mark, you're kind of touching into semi-aged realm. And depending if it's humid or dry storage, obviously that would have a large effect on the tea and the acceleration of its aging. So drier storage, then obviously you're going to need to wait longer, maybe towards that 15 years for semi-aged tea. So just a lot of components and variables to consider when we talk about aged pour. Jeff, what do you think? What do you do with old tea wrappers? Well, you can probably ask Winking Cat if she's on here. I give my old tea wrappers to Winking Cat, and she has some art projects with those. One thing that I thought was interesting is old tea wrapper. If there's a particular tea you like a lot, why not frame it? So she framed some of those. I thought that was really cool. And then why not build a lantern? Why not build a old style kind of Chinese lantern out of the tea wrappers? Wouldn't that be fun? Predominantly what I do now, though, is when I have a caddy of tea, I'll take the wrapper and I'll just cut out the label, and then I'll fold it so then I can always identify that tea in that jar, because time passes and maybe I have too much tea. I'll forget. I'll forget what tea is in there. So this is a great little cheat sheet to know what's in your tea jars. So that's how I use old tea wrappers. Curious how do you all use those? Bulong and Jingmai to start. So there's a good one. There's a Jinggu Bulong blend. That's 2010. So that's an older tea. That's a 10-year mark. So that's one you can consider. It's a Bulong Jinggu 2010. I think that's a Danong production as well. It is a Danong production. That's sold by Bana and Danong too. So check those out. Tea Curious. Jeff recommended me the 1993 Chanshang show from Bana Tea Company, and it was the most incredible show. Did I recommend that tea? I don't know if I did. Are you sure that was me? That may have been someone else, potentially. Changed my mind, and Age Short was beginning to toy with the idea that wasn't worth the time and money. That's real. That's those aged teas. Oh my goodness, stomaching those price points. We should talk about this. If you want to buy aged pour and then you see some aged pours that maybe some people recommend to you, and you see them, maybe in the 4-figure, right, $1,000-some, you might think to yourself, is it worth it? It's a good question. And so naturally, you might start to say, you know what, if I just want to try some aged pour, I'm not going to spend that much. Let's instead buy a cheaper aged tea. Maybe I just want to buy one at $50, $60, or $100 or $200. And you're really going to run into some problems there. One, the likelihood of a good quality aged pour in the low hundreds is going to be more unlikely. And when you try to purchase aged pour or famous mountain pour or ancient arbor pour at an affordable price, you're going to run into this problem of maybe never being able to ever drink an authentic version of that tea. And if you aren't able to drink an authentic version of truly aged pour, of truly ancient arbor pour, you're never going to understand the beauty of those teas, right? Ancient arbor pour is quite contrary to what most people experience. Ancient arbor pour is indeed actually very light. It's very aromatic, perfume-like, sweet. It's thirst-quenching. It is not bitter, astringent, and rough, which many people believe pour tea is. And so already contrary. And the first time you drink ancient arbor pour, you might think, oh, this is very light, this is boring. If you're used to a very strong palate. And so I think when buying pour, it's very, very important to buy the smallest amount possible. It's probably better to try 7 grams of a very expensive tea, maybe 2 or 3 very expensive teas, than to buy $150 of a large cake of an aged pour. It's better to spend $200 on 14, 16 grams of tea than to potentially spend $150 for 500 grams of tea that's supposedly both 20 years old. Why would I say that? It sounds absurd. It sounds crazy, Jeffrey. Why are you saying that? Because if you're still learning about aged pour, it's worth the investment to understand a variety of expensive teas, to be able to identify what is aged pour, what is the taste profile I am looking for. And so, yes, I'm buying less tea, but this time I'm trying 2 or 3 or 4 teas that are very expensive. So I have reduced my risk, meaning that if I just get one tea, the risk of that being authentic is higher. I mean, the risk of that being mislabeled is higher than if I were to diversify and get 4 expensive teas, even though they're smaller. So I've greatly reduced my risk of getting a fake or fraudulent tea or misrepresentation of that quality by diversifying a little bit. Yes, I get a lot less tea than a huge, massive tea cake, which can be fun. But the whole point of stepping into the world of Ancient Arbor, aged tea, famous mountain tea, is to learn why is aged tea so famous? Why is aged tea so expensive? Why is famous mountain so expensive? Why is Ancient Arbor tea so expensive? We need to understand why. We need to learn why. We need to taste why and feel why. So we have to do that by stepping out of our comfort zone. And this is the barrier of entry, I think, for pour teas, is budget. And so if we're just constantly, as Americans, unfortunately, we're big on value. Lots of things, right? I'm going to spend a little bit and I want a lot. And with really high-end commodities, luxury products, it's the opposite. And we have to be able to cherish those things. And so I really fight for, you should get, samples of expensive aged or famous or Ancient Arbor teas and try them. Spend time with them. One, you're going to cherish them a lot more. Trust me. If you have a small bag that you spent $45, $50 with and it's got 7 grams, you are going to make that tea right. You're going to be paranoid about it. You're going to drink it. You're going to really enjoy it versus throwing $150 at who knows what, supposedly aged tea, and then maybe not liking it and just throwing a bunch of tea in your pot. You're not going to cherish it. So once you spend some time with samples and understanding the tea, learn what you like, understand why this tea is expensive. So once you drink that expensive tea, you need to think to yourself, would I pay this much money? Why are other people paying this much money? And how does it compare to other teas in the market? So use that philosophy, that thought process when purchasing tea. Because I will just tell you from my experience, if you're thinking you can buy a 20-year-old tea for less than $500 some, the likelihood of that happening is almost like zero. It's very, very unlikely, especially if it's going to be from old tea trees or good quality, because you have to think about that. Good quality tea someone purchased, they kept in their inventory, which means no one was willing to buy that tea over 20 years. They just let it sit there. Maybe the real reason why someone didn't buy that tea for 20 years was because they didn't like it or they couldn't sell it. So they just sat there. It's still in the inventory, and hey, I still have this tea. I'll sell it super cheap because it's old. So you have to really keep in mind, if it's really good tea, there's obviously going to be a market. People are going to want that tea, and they're going to be willing to pay for that tea. So that's my approach to those things, especially with aged pour, especially into a genre that I don't know much about, and I want to learn about it. I'm going to take baby steps, and that's well worth the investment of a few $100s to buy a bunch of samples from renowned, believable, trustable, credible vendors, and then try those teas and spend time with them, right? I'm going to get a large variety, and I can try what's really expensive and learn. And then later, after I've made some notes and diagnosis of what I like and what I don't like and what I think is valuable and what I think I would spend money on, then I can go make a larger purchase. But to buy a large amount of something that is supposedly a scarce commodity that I haven't tried before, I feel is counterproductive. Just me, just my personal expression. I could be wrong, I could be right, but that's just from my own experience, right? So hopefully that's helpful. Maybe just age show from Bana. So that's good. I think I may have some changes on that particular recommendation, but I do think, yeah, there's a lot of vendors that do a pretty good job at curating, and I think that vendor selection will improve. But yeah, there's definitely some good deals to be had. As a new tea drinker, it appears that the bigger obstacle of buying authentic and quality tea is access and not money. I have no idea where to even buy stuff or what I'm looking at a place like YS. YS, I think it's Yunnan Sourcing. They're a big one. They're a big player, right? I'm assuming that's what you would be referring to. So, yes, I mean, it's kind of the fire, as I'm stealing an analogy from Daniel, the fire hose approach, right? So just really incredible selection, but just taking a fire hose and just throwing everything at you, and then it's up to the client, it's up to the consumer. The fault and the risk is on the consumer of purchasing teas that you like, rather than the vendor. So it's a very common approach that we've seen, which I think has a lot of, from a business standpoint, makes a lot of sense. It's actually I think a pretty unique way to go about and be successful in a business, because you really are providing the opportunity, and then people have to spend time and diagnose. And that's very difficult. I think many of us have been through that route. And so I will say your best friend when learning about and distinguishing pour is experience. It's going to be your own experience. It's very important to keep detailed notes and really follow up about what you think is valuable. And your taste will change over time, right? As we learn more and try different types of flavor profiles, it's okay, our taste will change. But most important, when drinking pour, specifically pour is more strong on the body, well, with the exception of maybe matcha, because you're drinking the whole tea leaf. You want to make sure it's comfortable in the body. And so whatever pour you decide to drink or like, make sure when you drink it, it's natural. So when you drink it, it's comfortable in the mouth. It's comfortable in the stomach, meaning it doesn't make you agitated. It doesn't make you caffeinated. It makes you very calm and comfortable. You can drink it regularly without any kind of side effects. So that's the first thing. And then you want to experiment with as many vendors as possible. Pour, unfortunately, is a buyer's beware market. So just do your best in trying more, asking credible people difficult questions. I'm a big advocate about trying to ask vendors questions and learning more. And always buy small quantities. Don't buy large quantities. And if a lot of teas are on sale, like they're on sale, like, oh, this is discounted this year, that's usually not a positive indication for quality for pour. Now, green, white, oolong, and black teas are different. They tend on freshness and shelf-life. So obviously sales make sense. So, but for pour, it's supposed to appreciate in value over time. So I do agree with you. It's a very difficult industry market to go through. So just be patient. Find people you enjoy drinking tea with that critically think about what they're drinking, how they're drinking it, and never be 100% sure that the label of the tea you're drinking is indeed what the tea is. Right. So that would be another thing. Jeff actually has a store of teas. He's handpicked. Also, Danong Tea Productions are good, and some Bona Tea Company inventory as well. That's true. Those are two places you can check out as well. Buy from respected brands. Fantastic. Love that. That is short and sweet. Yes, respected brands. Respected brands, trustworthy brands, not just on the U.S. market. Now, this is if you want to go take that comment to a new level. Is the brand trusted and respected? Not only in the U.S., but in the countries that matter. What does that mean? Countries that have history of pour, culture of pour, and they have connoisseurship of pour. Educated professionals that are drinking pour, right? So that's China, that's Taiwan, some parts of Singapore, maybe even Malaysia, outskirts of China. The brand, is it valued and trusted there? Now, I do understand that is a high standard to put a tea brand at, but that will bring significant weight to the quality of the tea. Because if it is trusted and respected in those parts of the world, in addition to America, I think that is an incredible standard to achieve. Because that's where I would say it's weighted even more so. It's more important to have the trust and recognition in those countries because they have so much more significance and part of the pour tea market. So that's a difficult one, though. So but that's something to keep in mind. Also, I think longevity of the brand, the history of the brand is important, right? If it's a new brand, they could have some hit or misses. But if the brand's been around for 10 or so years, right, they've been able to survive the difficulty of running a business, which means clients are buying their tea year after year. So that's a good one. I just posted a video on investing in Pu-erh, and I kind of talk about the different aspects you should look for in a company when buying Pu-erh. And I talked about it, in a theoretical educational purpose of investing in Pu-erh, but you could apply it to simply buying good quality. Why not? Why not apply those aspects to buying good quality Pu-erh? So lots of things to think about. So I need to get to my next infusion of this tea. We're coming up here almost an hour. Oh my goodness, how time flies. If any of you have any additional questions, this would be the great time to ask them. I think this even went public. That's why so many people are tuning in. This is supposed to be a patron live. That's totally fine. I might be doing once a month public lives. If you do think that's a good idea and you do want to submit your questions, just put them in the comments below. I think that would be fun to explore, just to kind of get a new diversity of questions that range outside of Pu-erh. We're always looking for new questions because it allows us to learn more, get different people's perspectives and ideas on it. And I think it's particularly important as the tea market and the Pu-erh tea market is growing. So if you have any additional questions, drop them in the comments below, and we will get to them when we can. Are you in Jeff's Patreon Cinzo? I don't think so. I think this was public. So there's actually people dropping in outside of Patreon. I think it's happened twice. This is the second time I've done this, because now I'm doing the live stream via my mobile, and sometimes it's difficult to make sure unlisted is picked. That's fun. Everyone's welcome. It's my mistake. That's the more the better, right? Gets more questions. I love it. But yeah, those of you that are newer, you're more than welcome to check out my Patreon. We probably have 40 or 50 live streams, in-depth live streams, where I talk about a variety of different topics in great detail. So feel free to jump on Patreon. If you like this content, you want to ask more questions, it's a great place to be, to kind of get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of Pu-erh tea buying. Right? That's very humbling. I appreciate that. I do appreciate the patrons because they've supported me to really kind of post more on YouTube, to make some of that content available to the public. That's because of the support of Patreon. So I do appreciate everyone that finds this useful. And I feel that at least I can use some of my last 10 to 12 years of Pu-erh and help other people. If they can help other people buying Pu-erh tea with confidence, then I think I've achieved my goal. So I thank you all for supporting. If Shinjo was based in Japan, that's true because Daniel's in Japan. So that would be cool, where everyone is tuning in. We got to get Jeff motivated again. I know, right? I just covered such a variety of topics that I'm just trying to see, like, maybe I'm supposed to move out of Pu-erh a little bit. Maybe I'm supposed to talk about more Teaware related topics. Who knows? In Canada, oh wow! So we got Vietnam, Japan, Canada, USA, 4 countries. Anyone outside of those 4 countries? Well, thank you, Ray. I appreciate that. If you really want to go, you should all check out Tea Curious, the Discord community, the Instagram community. And now she has her water, Tea Curious. I think it's Tea Curious Water. Fantastic resource. Has really gone in the nitty gritty of building a tea community, and then adjusting water for tea. So if you want to go down that rabbit hole, she's probably the best person to go down that with. Great resources there. But that's true. Popularity and quality is unfortunately often confused. Popularity does not mean quality. And it also goes to, here in America, we believe cleanliness or clean equals quality. And in a lot of parts in Asia, especially in luxury commodities, quality equals clean. So there is a lot of labels. Now, I do support the push and the market push for clean. I think that's good. But sometimes people kind of go overboard with labels and classifications to help with marketing. and it may not reflect quality. I've had many organic certified teas that were just appalling quality in terms of taste, that are quite expensive, sometimes more expensive than decent quality teas that don't have that certification. So, of course, take that with a grain of salt. It's not always the case, but do keep your mind open. But there's different determinants of quality. Popularity versus quality is a fantastic one. Clean versus quality is another fantastic one. So there's a lot of things to think about. Yeah, Canada. I'm trying to do a trip to Canada. That's going to be our next road trip, I think, is to Canada. Because we haven't gone there yet. Don't make me log into Steven's account. We learned from you. I appreciate that. Hopefully you can learn from I like the thought process of a triangle, right? When you're trying to learn a in-depth subject, it's always important to go to 3 different believable, credible people that do have disagreeing thoughts. And if you can circulate kind of that as a triangle and learn from those individuals and bounce ideas and critical thinking off of, it'll be far more effective than going to just one individual and learning from. So try to keep that in mind. Try to find 2 or 3 credible, believable people that you can learn from. I think it's a really good structure to learn anything in, rather than just one individual source. There we go. Public live streams would be a great resource. So maybe we should do one public live stream on YouTube. Since we built this community, and really the patrons made this all happen, made all this content on YouTube happen. So thank you to the patrons, right? And so maybe the next journey is to just take it to public YouTube live streams. Now we have quite a community. I can't believe 1,400 people decided they wanted to subscribe to some poor YouTube channel. So thank you all for doing that. Maybe that's the next stage of the journey. As a team, it should be its own country. But it is just, in my limited opinion, and informed by my own experience, maybe they just need a different perspective, i.e. yours. Ha, ha, ha. Well, I think my perspective is very strange. But, yeah, that's very humbling. I appreciate that. So, I was going to talk about this kettle, and I didn't. So, this kettle, why do I like this kettle more than gooseneck now? I didn't think that was going to happen. I thought it was going to be a kettle I use for rye pour only. I was going to use my gooseneck for the raw. So, gooseneck kettle. The fellow gooseneck kettle, you cannot pour fast. It is not like other gooseneck kettles where if you tilt it, it'll pour faster. The fellow gooseneck kettle pours slow. And so that has been a con, right? That has been a drawback for some people. They don't like how slow it pours. Now, I feel for raw pour, you don't want to agitate the tea. You want it to pour in slow, so it kind of protects you from yourself by pouring slower. Also, when you're pouring in a teapot, if they're small, you don't have a huge opening. And if you have a big tip, it can be difficult to aim and precise the pour. So gooseneck is, I think, still the go-to method for most people. It serves a variety of purposes. Also, for aged pour, I've talked about the overflow wash a number of times, especially if it's aged or in a dusty environment, it's been aged. You need a very slow pour to slowly overflow the teapot. So why am I all of a sudden using this kettle? Not the best place to start because you do have to control the pour more. It's not on autopilot like it is on the gooseneck. The reason I like it is because I have that control on the pour. It took a few days to get used to it, where literally it's just too much water coming out too fast because I was used to pouring at a particular angle. So you definitely have to pour a little bit slower. Now also keep in mind the distance from the teapot to the pouring mechanism is a lot farther than a goose kettle, so it does take some used to. And so I just go slow, right? And then I'm able to get that same consistency of a gooseneck by holding back. But it's just as easy to put too much tea into the teapot with this kettle. But because of that flexibility of being able to pour faster or slower, and after I've got maybe a week or two, I got good at pouring at the correct speed, I really like this. So I feel if you're up for a challenge, you want to have more flexibility. You don't want to. It's not as relaxed as the gooseneck. You're definitely going to have to be more focused on brewing. But if you're okay with those things, the little bit of extra effort, I prefer the flexibility. So I've actually liked this kettle more than I thought. I only like really fellow kettles, really, but I was never sure if I would like the gooseneck or the triangle spout. And so if you're okay with a little bit of effort, now that's my preferred choice, which is funny to think about that. Alrighty. Zurishishi ASMR. I'm confused. Hey Dylan, you're from the US. Nice to meet you. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for joining on live stream. We're just having all sorts of fun debates about Tetsubuns and kettles and pour tea and buying pour tea. We're kind of tuned up towards the end of the live stream. So anyone has any last questions, this would be the time to ask them. I appreciate everyone for joining the live stream, asking awesome questions. For patrons, we will be doing one more live stream on the Patreon community this month. And if you have any particular topics for that, please post them in the comments below or message me directly. And it does sound like there is some interest in doing public YouTube live streams like we are doing today. And if you're interested in that, let me know. We should probably find some kind of schedule to do that once a month. To do that. I found that Jade Leaves tea. Oh, I found the Jade Leaf teas. That looks cool. It is cool. And so when you're going to get into those teas, the price can be a little more expensive. So buy small quantities, of course. 1 cake, 100-gram cake. Play with it. And when you do have a new tea, Tea Curator Ray and myself, we have a great interview that Ray did with me on the 3-day rule on my YouTube channel. So check that out. I think new teas need proper time to understand. You need to spend time with them. Strongly recommend the 3-day rule with any new pour tea to really understand the quality and what people are drinking. Well, I just heard about this and joined your Patreon. Thanks so much for your support. The best way to get the most out of Patreon, because a lot of it is supporting the live streams, so of course you're going to be able to join all the private live streams going forward. But take a little look at the past live streams. There's a lot on there, so maybe don't watch them all, or you're more than welcome to if you want. Find topics that you are particularly interested in, and then find the live streams that way. Also, all the content's kind of located in there too. I also will post some personal thoughts and things like that too. So one of the biggest aspects to the Patreon are 2 things. 1, access to these kind of live streams on a consistent basis. And 2, being able to directly ask me questions or opinions on individual purchasing of teas, of thoughts, etc. Those are the 2 biggest values. And of course, thank you so much for supporting. It'll just kind of make me keep doing these live streams and sharing my journey. Maybe, live stream idea, love it. Okay, maybe the state of pour tea market in today in China. I'm interested in finding a tea that has a tennis ball aroma. It's the first time I've heard that one. You might need to help me understand that aroma more. So very, very interesting comment. The pour tea market today, well, I'll tell you one thing. It's very expensive. The wealth gap in China is larger than ever before, just like it is in America. It's quite large. It's not larger than it's ever been, but it's growing. In China, it's particularly large, and that's a growing concern in China. But with that, there's more and more wealthy, educated people with a lot of resources willing to pay an absurd amount of money for quality pour. And that's why you're seeing these outrageous prices for famous mountain pour, where they're buying out before production. I mean, it's really unprecedented, and will unfortunately continue to do so. I think famous mountains will continually become more and more and more out of reach, especially for old tea trees. So that is an increasing concern. And the accessibility to those teas. And there's also the whole idea around climate. Is the climate change going to affect these growing regions? I don't think in the short term, but if we're looking out 5 to 10 years or so, you have to understand that the geography position of China is more at risk to those changes than somewhere like the U.S. So there's a lot of other concerns to consider, but I do think price will continue to increase drastically, and will to do so at an unprecedented pace, unless there's some kind of market event or international event that determines otherwise. So I think, unfortunately, famous mountain teas from old tea trees will be harder and harder and harder to get, and maybe that is more reason to see what's on the market available today at an affordable price, and buy them in more bulk, right? Because I think next year when we see famous mountains release from credible brands, they're only going to get more expensive. So that would be one consideration. But I like it. We'll talk more about that in the following live. So thank you all so much. Enjoy a good cup of tea. The weather is getting hotter. More raw teas I'll be drinking. And if you want me to drink a particular tea on next live, just let me know. Alrighty, y'all. Have a wonderful rest of this last day on the weekend. Have a great start to your week. And let's crush it. Let's make this year. Let's learn something new. Let's be productive. Let's grow. And let's stay positive. And life will be good. Anytime. Thanks for the kind words. It's fun to do these. Take care.